and then I'll turn it over to Annie and she will get us started. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Shauna. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Annie Mazzarella, Council Aide and Policy Advisor in the City of Tempe, and I'm joined by my colleague, fellow Council Aide and Policy Advisor, Sapand Alizada. We are here to discuss source of income protections and educate you about our city's proposed ordinance. We will provide some basic information about source of income, such as its definition, the types of income we are talking about, and then we will discuss source of income discrimination and its effects and why protections should be considered by the City of Tempe. We'll provide additional information about how the cities of Phoenix and Tucson implemented their recently enacted source of income protections, similar to what this one would do. And finally, we will recommend ordinance language for the City of Tempe to adopt for Council's consideration. Next slide. This aligns with the City Council's strategic priority, quality of life, namely the below performance measures surrounding homelessness and poverty. Next slide.
So again, my name is Sapand Alizada. It's a pleasure to be here with everyone today explaining what we're seeking to do in the City of Tempe. I just want to provide a definition of what source of income means. And source of income is any lawful source of income or support that provides funds to or on behalf of a renter or buyer of housing and is verifiable as to the amount, regularity, receipt, and length of time received or to be received. So there are a variety of sources of income, as we can see on this slide that we've put together here. Some are wages and salary, grants and loans, inheritance, pension, annuities, child spousal support, Social Security or disability insurance, foster care subsidies, alimony, housing choice vouchers, or other sorts of government assistance.
So what is source of income discrimination? Source of income discrimination refers to the practice of refusing to rent to an applicant because of their lawful form of income. Typically, this involves the denial of housing based on the applicant relying on a housing voucher, disability benefits, Social Security benefits, veterans benefits, any of the number that Sapand just mentioned in order to pay the rent. One would most commonly see this in advertisements or statements made by a landlord or a property manager that they do not accept rental assistance or other lawful forms of income. Next slide.
So there are a variety of reasons why we should consider this added protection for Tempe's renters. First, there's no prohibition of this type on this type of discrimination. There are no source of income protections for Tempe residents who need them the most. We've heard a multitude of stories of Tempe housing voucher participants who are finding it difficult to find housing in a time where housing rental prices are increasing all across the state, especially in Tempe. So 30 to 40% of individuals and families who use housing vouchers are unable to secure housing. And also, like Annie mentioned in the first slide, this ordinance change will align with Tempe's strategic priorities.
In the current Tempe City Code, Chapter 2, Article 8, it states that it is unlawful to discriminate based on race, color, religion, gender, gender identity, familial status, age, national origin, disability, sexual orientation, or veteran status. When we move this ordinance forward, we would simply add source of income to the list in this already existing ordinance. Next slide.
So I am going to be going through this flow chart that Annie and I developed with the help of our Housing Services Director, Irma Halimi-Kane, and our Director of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion, Dr. Valisha Humes. And we will be posting this PowerPoint in its full entirety on our website. So if anything is difficult to see, we will be sharing this with everyone. So please do not worry that, hey, I only had one shot to look at it. You're going to be able to see it and access it very, very thoroughly. So the first step is that a claim of discrimination, source of income discrimination, is received by the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Office here in the City of Tempe. The next step is the DEI office, for short, is going to look to see at that complaint and see if it's a source of income complaint or a complaint based on the fact that the resident has a housing choice voucher and the resident is saying that the housing choice voucher, that the landlord is not accepting his or her housing choice voucher. I'm going to first start with if it's a housing choice voucher complaint, that process right there to the right. So after the Housing Services Office receives the complaint, they're going to investigate it a little further, and they're going to contact the landlord to educate, mediate the claim, and negotiate and come to a resolution so that the process ends and the issue is resolved, and so that the tenant who is using a housing choice voucher can find housing and use that housing choice voucher. If the complaint is resolved, landlord agrees, and based on our experiences, based on what we've heard from Tucson and Phoenix, issue is resolved right there. That's it. Or if the Housing Services Department finds that there's no discrimination going on because the resident has a housing choice voucher, there's no finding and the process ends. But if there is a valid claim that, hey, discrimination is taking place because I'm a housing choice voucher holder, the Housing Services Office will work with a third-party agent, like a nonprofit or another organization, to investigate the claim further. And that third-party agent will work with our Housing Services Office to come up with a solution, to come up with to investigate and see, hey, is discrimination really happening? Again, if there's no finding of discrimination, claim ends, that's it. But if there is a valid claim that, hey, a landlord is discriminating against a housing choice voucher holder, that goes back to the City of Tempe's Housing Services Office. City of Tempe's Housing Services Office will then refer the claim of discrimination based on a housing choice voucher to the City Attorney's Office for further mediation, negotiation, and education of the landlord. Again, this is not something that if you violate it as a landlord, you're going to get fined right away. There's a lot of back and forth. There's a lot of time to really resolve the issue in an amicable, non-legal way. But if it's not able to be resolved, then a fine can be imposed. So now I'll move over to the left and I'll talk about how if a source of income complaint does not relate to the housing voucher. So again, if it's received, once it's received by DEI, Diversity, Equity, Inclusion, Diversity, Equity, Inclusion will contact the landlord for education, mediation, negotiation, and try to get it resolved to see, hey, landlord, you're not allowed to discriminate against someone just because they're using their child support for rent. That's not illegal in the City of Tempe. But let's figure out a way we can get this issue resolved so that we can get that person into housing and also have your worries dealt with. So, but if the landlord looks and says, and there's still a lot of back and forth, there's not a resolution reached, then DEI will refer that claim to, again, the same third-party agent, which could be a nonprofit, and the third-party agent will further investigate the claim of discrimination based on source of income. So if the third-party agent finds that source of income discrimination is taking place, they will refer that back to the DEI office, and then DEI will, again, refer to the City Attorney's Office for mediation, negotiation, education, and arbitration of the claim to get this issue resolved in a non-legal means. If it is unsuccessful, then a possible fine can be levied on the landlord. But again, I just want to reiterate, there's a lot of back and forth. There's a lot of cooperation, working together to ensure that someone gets into housing and that the landlord's worries are resolved.
Great job, Sapand. Thank you. Just to provide some framework and context, we can look towards like ordinances already implemented in Arizona cities like Phoenix and Tucson. So the city of Phoenix, for instance, their fair housing complaints are administered by Chapter 18 of their city code. This specific chapter and section of their code gives their Equal Opportunity Department, which is very similar to our Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Office, the authority to enforce protective class complaints related to fair housing. As for the city of Tucson, if their Office of Equal Opportunity, again, very similar to our DEI office, finds there is reasonable cause to believe that a respondent has engaged in a discriminatory housing practice, they will promptly seek to eliminate the discriminatory practice through similar non-legal channels like the ones Sapan just described. Next slide. As for our next steps on this ordinance, we will be sharing this same presentation to the City Council on October 19th and October 26th, where the final vote will take place whether or not to move forward with this. Until October 1st, there should be a feedback form available on our website. If you go to tempe.gov/source of income, you can share your thoughts with us. Next slide.
So I just want to say thank you to everyone for your time and attention. We have a great crowd here. Annie and I, as well as Irma and Dr. Humes and others from the city of Tempe, will be at the library tonight for an in-person presentation. We look forward to seeing you all. We look forward to coming up with a very, very strong ordinance, a very great ordinance that can really, really help all parties in this matter. So thank you, and we'll love to take any questions.
Okay, thank you. So for questions and answers, we just want to make sure you all have the opportunity to provide comments or ask questions. So we ask that you either raise your hand or put them in the chat and I'll call on you. We do already have a question in the chat, so I'm going to go with that and then I will take hands. How does the city plan to address the fact that according to the state fair housing laws, there are population requirements that Tempe does not meet and that requirements would be required to pass a source of income ordinance that would not be subject to challenge?
So currently our city attorney is looking into that potential challenge, and we are taking appropriate steps to move forward in a legal way to comply with state law. And we're awaiting further information.
Okay, David, if you want to unmute and ask your question.
Yeah, I wanted to ask about clarify two things. The first is that what sometimes I've heard from people that like non-discrimination ordinances don't apply if it's on Craigslist or if it's in someone's home, like if you're trying to rent out a roommate or something like that. So I'm just trying to understand if this ordinance for Tempe will apply to basically all housing types.
I will defer to Miss Irma Holland-McCain if she is on the call to answer that question. Thank you, David. Appreciate you.
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Irma Holland-McCain, and I'm Community Health and Human Services Deputy Director. David, thank you for your question, and I believe that is going to require additional research on our end. So you mentioned, I'm sorry, renting a room, and what was the second scenario?
Well, like
things on Craigslist?
Yeah, on Craigslist, it's really like people say, you know, I'm only going to rent to women. I'm only going to rent to men. You have to, you know, you have to work so many hours a week. You have to, they have all these requirements. Sometimes they say you have to be vegan and things like that. And so it's just, I'm trying to make sure that we're trying to cover as many different housing types as possible.
Thank you for bringing that to our attention.
And I also was hoping to clarify, because one of the other things I ran into specifically with a place called Elliott's Crossing was that they had really outrageous income requirements. And so I'm just wondering if there's a way, because you can still discriminate against a voucher if you say, you know, like the income requirement can be higher than what you would get a Section 8 voucher. So if you had that having much income, you would no longer be cost burden. And so is there any way that we can have a protection to make sure that people aren't requiring 3, 4, 5 times the rent to qualify?
For that particular question, I'm going to defer to our legal. Clarence, you're on the call.
Thank you, Irma. Everybody, my name is Clarence Matherson. I'm the Deputy City Attorney for the City of Tempe. This ordinance will not affect whether or not they can require 3 to 4 times the income requirements that you're asking about. I mean, literally, I mean, this ordinance will only apply to the source of income. So whether or not they're discriminating based on the source of the income, there are other requirements that landlords may or may not have that this ordinance doesn't really affect or doesn't really touch.
Thank you for answering, but I think that's something that the city needs to look at, because that's essentially discriminating against the voucher. You know what I mean? Because the income requirement is too high to even to be on Section 8. So thank you.
Thank you, David. We've got your comments, and we'll make sure we present those to the council. Thanks.
And thank you, David. And as Sapan mentioned, there is a feedback form online and all of that information that we gather there, as well as the discussion at this meeting will be presented as the project moves forward. And so the next hand I have is Garrick, if you want to come off mute and ask your question.
Yeah, as I understand it, the city requires inspections at any time, and technically that's an invasion of their rights to be free from searches, as well as what do you intend to do about the properties have to be verified, and it can take weeks for a property to get verified. Most landlords won't be able to afford the 1, 2, 3, 4, 6, whatever weeks it takes to get a property verified and lose that income. I mean, most landlords are actually only making $200, $300, $500 a month in income. You know, I had 2 air conditioners go out this summer. I will not make income for a year and a half. So I don't know how they're going to address that. Here in the city of Phoenix, where this is already in place, it is definitely, you know, we don't know anything about these programs to deploy them. So the city of Phoenix is not giving information. I mean, I've talked to my attorney, other attorneys, the biggest landlord representatives in the state, and there is no clear definition. So are you guys going to define what these vouchers are, what these incomes are, what their requirements are? That was a 3-part question. So if you want me to start at the beginning, I understand.
Irma, would you like to address that question about that? How long does it take for?
I can address it. I'm gonna try to answer your first 2 questions, Garrick. So we get our inspections completed within a maximum of 5 days once we receive the paperwork from the landlord. And as far as inspections, there is always notice given to the landlord and to the homeowner, the landlord who's trying to rent it out. So it's not an invasion of privacy. We are required by HUD regulations to make sure that the unit they are living in and we're paying rent for is always in safe, decent, and sanitary condition. So that we have an initial inspection, and we will only go out other than that once a year for an annual inspection. And if either the landlord or the tenant requests a special inspection, we will go out. But there's always at least a 48 hours notice that we're going out. And I'm sorry, I forgot your 3rd question.
Let's see. So 5 days, I mean, I have it from local landlords that it's not getting completed within 5 days. I mean,
within Tempe it is. I'm not sure I can't speak to what's happening in the city of Phoenix, but in
are
Tempe,
you separate? Is Tempe separate from Phoenix?
yes, sir.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. And then the 3rd question is all of the policy requirements. I've gotten these calls. I've tried to take different programs. I can't keep up with the amount of programs that are out there and what they require. I've got people, you know, saying, hey, your rent's more than my voucher's for. Let me pay you extra money, which I've been told that's illegal for some programs. There are different program requirements. Some are mental illness, some are this, some are that. It's very, very unclear with Phoenix on what is a voucher. Is it anyone who has a voucher, or
Like it can't
I mean, there's low to no oversight on what falls under this.
So I can't speak for Phoenix. I can tell you that here in Tucson, we have a very strict guidelines pertaining to our Section 8 program. And if you want to schedule something one-on-one, we can definitely talk about it.
Well, I'd like it to be in if this is going to go through, we need to see it within the requirement within Tempe. It's
Okay.
right now, there is just no guidance.
So we have payment standards, which are what the maximum amount that we are able to pay for certain bedroom size. It's split out by bedroom size. And then and we have to make sure that the rent is affordable for the tenant. So they can pay no more than 40% of their income when they first move into a unit.
Right, but What voucher? What voucher do you represent?
Section 8. The,
Section 8. That's
housing choice
what I'm
voucher.
saying is, if this is income to discrimination, is it every single payment that someone can get from a church or this place or that place? I mean, that's what's very unclear.
If
They-
if I may, what we are attempting to address in our ordinance change is ongoing income sources. So for example, a one-time payment to a landlord for being behind in rent, for example, that is not necessarily what we're talking about. And with regard to the various voucher types, so the HUD's, it used to be referred to as Section 8 and the housing choice voucher. And you're right, there are multiple types of vouchers. There's the housing choice voucher, there's permanent supportive housing vouchers, there's a number of various voucher types, but they are all essentially administered the same by each jurisdiction that has a housing authority. At the city of Tempe, our programming is predominantly housing choice voucher programs. And then we do have a number of boutique programs, such as our mainstream vouchers, which are intended for non-elderly disabled, our VASH vouchers intended for formerly homeless veterans, family unification vouchers in partnership with DCS. And so, but they're all run the same. They all have payment standards that Sherry was alluding to earlier. They all have housing quality standards, requirements, and they're all the same for all of the various programs. I can't speak to how, for example, the city of Phoenix is administering their ordinance change, but for us, the ordinance change is having to do with or adding on source of income as a source of discrimination if not being allowed to rent due to source of income. But we are in that ordinance change is not specifics on how the city of Tempe will be a good business partner with the landlord community in administering our vouchers and in all of the things that come along with it, like inspections and payments. I hope that helps.
I mean, I do hear what you're saying. I mean, you just created a whole new problem is I've never heard of half the vouchers you just mentioned. And I spend a ton of time in classes, attorneys, everything to, make sure I know about this stuff. And it just, we're like, now this is in effect in Phoenix. I'm in multiple cities in Arizona and we still don't have a definition. And because I don't have a definition, neither do the people trying to enforce it. So now we're both left up to interpretation.
So
And now there's a huge amount of differences. And I have people calling and saying, you have to let me rent it because I read it online. And it's not that I wouldn't, I just need to know what their voucher, what it is. And always we come to, my standards, which then it's like, oh, I'm moving in 2 or 3 months. And so it's just, I don't even know what these programs are. And so I can't keep track of their standards to help people even.
Thank you, Mr. O'Connell. Well, it sounds like we have a tremendous opportunity here at the city of Tempe, especially with our newly hired landlord engagement lead to really answer a lot of these questions for you and others who feel similarly. So thank you.
Newly hired what?
Landlord engagement.
Okay.
So his name is Christopher Grossback. He's on this call, I believe, with us. But he will be taking he has taken the lead in landlord engagement. And this is definitely one area that we could firm up being a better business partner to the landlord community in providing this type of education that you're speaking about how to accept our vouchers, how to administer them in your own lines of business.
Mr. Garrick, I'm glad that you brought this up. This is Valisa Humes. I'm the Chief Diversity Officer here with the City of Tempe. And I think there's 2 points of clarification which you raised, and I just want to go back and briefly touch on them because it is about how we define source of income. And so one, which you have eloquently raised in terms of the various programs that are offered through housing authorities, which Irma is so willing and like most of our city here, to sit down with you and walk you through the programs that we offer here and what are those qualifications and criteria. But the other part of the definition is ongoing payments. So again, I thought Irma raised a good example of what it's not. So if somebody goes to a church or goes to a nonprofit and gets some help for a month or a one-time payment to cover something, that's not an ongoing payment. And so if that's not good enough for you to pay, to accept this month and rent, then that's not covered by this ordinance. So child support would be covered by this ordinance. An inheritance, something that if you get a trust payment every month, that would be covered. Alimony would be covered. Your pension would be covered. Those things that you receive on an ongoing basis that do not come through a traditional paycheck is what is considered an ongoing payment. Does that help?
That helps. I guess it's really just, the definition of these programs, which you mentioned quite a few I've never heard of, and I've been doing this for quite a few years.
And I would suggest you sit down with them because they will walk you through and it'll help clear up some of the misnomer.
Yeah, the issue is I put up an advertisement for a well-priced rental. I get hundreds of calls, and that's great, right? I would like to rent it to someone that fits in this rental. And then I get calls about, hey, I want to pay you money over this for that. I want to do this. I want to do that. And I don't know what is, what's what are the rules, how to define. And so what I'm saying is I don't want to just say no to everyone, but I would love for, right now, if you Google the income discrimination for Phoenix, it doesn't very clearly define exactly what those programs and the requirements are. I'd love for it to be inside of the requirements. So when a prospective renter who has a voucher, calls to tell me you have to accept me, which is fine. And if they apply and it makes the criteria, absolutely, that they also have access to what the exact rules are of this program. Because right now I'm getting calls from people with a church check and a lot of other I don't know what the systems or places that will pay their rent that I just have never heard of.
No, and we appreciate that feedback. And as I had mentioned, we will make sure and collect that so that we can make sure what moves forward is clear for everyone. So thank you, Garrick. We are going to have Susie. Your hand is next if you want to unmute if you have a question.
Yes, actually, I have two questions. I saw Jack on there. He does our inspections. I have 7 rentals, 4 in Chandler, 3 in Tempe. 6 of the 7 are Section 8 or some sort of one of those programs. And over the years, I've actually had pretty good experiences. The 2 times I didn't, it was a special program where the tenants were getting subsidized, but they had social workers that were supposed to be helping them with the budget and checking on them more regularly. And I just think that there's not enough resources for them to go out regularly. Like I literally would have to call constantly, go check on this tenant. I'm telling you, they're drinking like crazy. They're smoking in the unit. They're doing all these things. And then their social worker wouldn't show up for 2 or 3 weeks. And those are the ones I end up having to evict because they're destroying my units because the social worker isn't following up on what they need to be following up with. And I think it's just a shortage of the help. As a landlord, what can we do about that?
Thank you for your comments, Susan Jordan. I will go ahead and address this. So with regard to voucher types that do have a social work or case management component to it, I do understand your pain. Another avenue for you, however, is the voucher also is accompanied by a housing specialist. that is a different person than the social worker or case manager assigned to them. So for example, if the vouchers are for from Home Inc. or ABC, who are the 800-pound gorillas in administering those type of vouchers, I would highly recommend that you reach out to the administrators of the program, ABC, Home Inc., City of Phoenix, to Tempe, whoever it is, and work with the housing specialist to maybe make the connection with the case manager or social worker if it's not too late.
And I do know the case manager directly for one of my tenants. And both times that I took it, she was the case manager and it just didn't get done. And I don't want to throw her under the bus, so I'm not going to mention any names.
No,
But that's probably my most frustrating thing, is to take one of those other programs aside from specifically Section 8. My other question is, or my other question is paperwork. So time consuming, and we have to redo it every year. So can you still hear me?
Yes.
Oops.
You have been
Can
going
you
in
still
and
hear
out.
me?
Yes.
Oh, okay. The paperwork is just so time consuming, and so a lot of the tenants don't have vehicles and they don't have internet, and we have to go back and forth to get the city what they want. The inspections haven't been a big issue, except for when they change inspectors. One inspector won't call out something for 4 years and then they change, and all of a sudden the new inspector wants all these new things done. So that's a hard thing. But the paperwork, I mean, we're not getting any more rent than we would from somebody that wasn't Section 8, but we're spending another 4 or 5 hours every year to do all the paperwork. So what can we do about that? Because I'm happy with my Section 8 tenants, but every time one's up for renewal, I'm like, oh my God, I got to deal with the paperwork again.
Thank you for bringing that up, Ms. Jordan. So as I mentioned earlier, you know, the City of Tempe's Housing Authority wants to be as good of a business partner as possible. And this type of feedback will only help make us stronger. I would really encourage, you know, as our new landlord engagement person is on board and building our programming stronger, that you be included and participate in helping us with our engagement programming. To
I'm going to
include
shut my door. My husband turned on the grill.
to include shoring up these various things that you just brought to our attention. For example, the paperwork, the amount of time that it takes you. And, you know, while we can't buy cars or necessarily purchase the internet for our voucher participants, they do definitely have barriers, being low income. There are probably things that we can do a little bit better to make life easier for everyone involved. So thank you for your feedback.
Okay, where do we go to the next meeting where I can be there in person?
Susie, I can get, if I can connect you with Christopher, and then he also put his contact information in the chat. So then we can
Perfect.
connect you, yeah, with how you registered for the meeting and make sure that he can follow up with you for that.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Absolutely. So Sebastian's going to be next, and then we'll take a question in the chat and come back to our hands. So thank you for your patience. Sebastian, if you want to unmute and ask your question.
Sure thing. Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. Thank you for having this very well organized meeting on this issue. My name is Sebastian Del Portillo, he, him. I'm the campaign coordinator at Phoenix. For Phoenix for Unemployed Workers United, we organized to help pass this source of income ordinance in Phoenix, and we're really happy to see the initiative and effort that Tempe is putting forward to do this. You know, it's been great to hear from, you know, people who provide housing, right, their perspective, and I hope that some of these process-related issues get resolved, and that it is just as easy to take someone on that has a Section 8 voucher or some other type of voucher as someone in the rental market. I think like that's the ideal. So I'm glad that these conversations are happening, but I also want to ground us in what this ordinance is for, and it is to prevent prejudice and discrimination that occurs to people on a Section 8 or other voucher because they are poor. this discrimination is very common throughout the United States, and I'm glad y'all are taking on Section 8 tenants, but there are a lot of landlords who won't, and there are a lot of like big corporate landlords who definitely won't and have been doing their very best to evict people with non-renewals. That we're on Section 8 in apartments all over the valley, and then just saying, we're not going to renew your lease, we're not taking your money anymore. And they have to be, they're left to figure out what to do. And we know the housing stock for Section 8 is really small. So this ordinance will open up accessibility for people on Section 8 on vouchers and provide housing stability and health for our communities. So thank you. I guess the question that I have is in terms of the language, I would really love to see Tempe make language that is as comprehensive and as strong as possible within the confines of what we're doing. One of the biggest things that we've seen is that while people, can go and apply to a Section 8 now in Phoenix, a lot of landlords have been asking for an income requirement to make 3 times the rent. Basically what's happening is landlords or Section 8 apartments, etc., are asking people who are on Section 8 who can only pay 30% of their income for 3 times, the market rate. And it's a de facto discrimination at that point. And so I think someone mentioned this previously, but I think, it is really important to include language that addresses this. And it's not unheard of. Tucson has language on their ordinance that addresses this specifically. And they also put out guidance, to sort of like, demonstrate what discrimination can look like. And I'm going to drop the link here for their FAQ and the suggestions for language that we have for this ordinance. But on the FAQ, you will see that asking someone who is on Section 8 to make 3 times the rental rate income is a form of discrimination. And we see the same thing being advised to landlords, in other states. And so we'd really love to see this language included and this to be a practice to ensure that poor and working class people are being protected to the best extent that the city can provide.
Thank you for your comment, Sebastian. Irma, and then there's another question about in the chat asking how the city is going to invest within its own department to provide a quality partnership between the landlord and the city. What type of support, if any, will the owner receive once a participant has secured the home?
Thank you for that question. So I'm going to start generically, and then I'm going to ask Christopher Grossback to jump on and introduce himself and talk about some of the things that he has brewing. So far, within the last several months, the city of Tempe has embarked on really being, how would you say, taking a self-assessment of ourselves in relation to how we administer our programs. And very early on in my tenure, we embarked on a full revision of the policies that govern how we administer this program, the policies that we as a housing authority are allowed to create in addition to the HUD guidance that's provided us to administer this program adequately and within their confines. And so in that work, we really did the hard work of identifying where we've been the last several years and who we want to be going into the future. And so we revised our administrative plan or our policy document to match more modern times, if you would, modern business practices, and also revised in order to be far more responsive than we were required in our previous policy. So there is that. And then recognizing that in order to help our voucher holders lease up in the community, we needed to focus more on the landlord community who has long been ignored in administering these housing choice voucher programs. We've essentially taken for granted you all would be there when we needed you. And then, housing supply issues came to affect our fair cities, and it's getting harder and harder for our voucher recipients to successfully lease up in the community. So to that end, we received City Council's approval, and then subsequent after that, we received support monetarily to move forward in improving our relations, if you would, with our landlord clients. And so one of the first things that we were able to do that not only benefits the voucher holder, but also our landlord community is come alongside our voucher holder, and instead of requiring them to go through, because oftentimes they don't have the security deposit necessary to accompany their voucher to lease up in the community, we decided that we would start paying the security deposits. Whatever our voucher holders did not have saved up, we would pay the balance. And so we have seen tremendous impacts on our voucher holders' abilities to lease up in the community with just that action. Another thing that we've been able to do is, I believe it was effective back in January, our City Council approved our payment standards to 110% of fair market rents identified for us by HUD. And we elected to go 110% of payment standards, meaning we are paying above what the fair market rents identified for Tempe are. And with payment standards at that level, coupled with our security deposit assistance, we have seen tremendous movement forward and successfully leasing up our voucher holders. And there are further conversations happening about how to be a better partner with our landlord community. And Christopher, if you wouldn't mind hopping in and talking a little bit about what you know.
Hi, thanks, Irma. I'm Christopher Grosbeck. I'm the landlord engagement leader for the city of Tempe. I work with both our housing team here, our housing navigator, and our landlord community. We strongly affirm that as a landlord who participates on our voucher program, that you're one of our partners, and we want to understand your needs and your concerns, and to be able to meet those on a one-to-one basis. So if you have a concern, we want to be able to address it. We want to be able to help the voucher become a normal course of your business. We believe that our voucher holders are strong renters that provide a valuable addition to our community and to your rentals, because the voucher is secure and stable and predictable. Like Irma said, it's covering at market rate or close to. And so, and we do cover those back end costs of a security deposit if needed. And so really, to Nadia's question, what support will we provide? Will we provide business relationship support to be able to handle those applications, to be able to handle questions about how the payments are made? And then as needs roll in, you can always contact me and we can discuss those concerns or what's needed for the future. Like understanding that it's an administrative burden at times, or understanding how inspections work, or understanding how to add more vouchers to your program. We'll meet you where you have those needs and where we can jump in to provide them. Of course, we have HUD standards that we have to meet, and it's all going to be really a balancing act. But our team is ready and able to do that. We have a great professional team that's passionate about our work and about what the city of Tempe can accommodate for our voucher holders. And really, you as our landlord partners, you play a big role in making our city stable and safe and secure and livable. And so while I can't speak to specifics on what each voucher holder will need, I don't believe any of the vouchers that we offer need have tenants that will need wraparound services. I'll have Irma confirm that, and so you can trust that our voucher holders are like our market rate renters, just with this assistance from the city of Tempe to help cover their rental costs.
Thank you, Christopher. And just to dovetail on what Christopher just mentioned with regard to, as I mentioned earlier, there are a number of voucher types that fall under what is called a Section 8 program. And as was alluded to earlier, there are a number of voucher types that are accompanied by, or supposed to be accompanied by, a social worker or case management type support. And for the vouchers that we at the city of Tempe administer, for clients that are might have a lot more barriers. For example, it might be their health or their status. We have brought on board, in addition to Christopher, we also have brought on board a housing specialist whose caseload will be made up of all of these special purpose vouchers. And she has a tremendous background in case management and homelessness service provision. So she will be able to also, in addition to their social worker or case manager that's assigned, be able to step in, if you would, and help support those tenants in your units.
Thank you, Irma. Courtney, you had your hand up next.
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Courtney Levinus, and I'm with the Arizona Multi-Housing Association. So we are the largest statewide rental property management trade firm in Arizona. We've got over 380,000 units under membership and about 2,500 members. So I wanted to make a couple of comments, and then I've got several questions. And first of all, and it was brought up earlier, but we are highly concerned with the ordinance and the potential that it definitely violates the Arizona state statutes. Tempe does not meet either of the statutory requirements outlined in state statutes as far as a population threshold of 350,000 or more by the 1990 census, and a fair housing ordinance that had to have been adopted prior to January 1, 1995. And the whole impetus behind this statutory requirement is that the legislature recognized really early on that fair housing is not an area where we want patchwork legal requirements, because many properties owners, as you've heard here today already, operate in cities throughout Arizona, and to have a patchwork of requirements and legal requirements makes it very difficult to manage their business and make sure that they do not violate the ever important fair housing laws. So those are the reasons it was put into statutes. I'm curious if the city of Tempe recognizes that just 2 months ago, the city of Glendale, who was also considering a source of income ordinance, determined that in fact, if they moved forward with an ordinance, they would be in violation of state statutes, as Glendale had also not met the population threshold. So that's one question. And then, I do want to address that HUD, when this program was put into place by Congress in 1974, it was developed as a voluntary program and has existed since 1974 as a voluntary program. While Phoenix and Tucson have adopted a mandatory source of income ordinance, they are still in violation of state statutes, as it is not equivalent to the state federal or the state fair housing requirements. But again, these are voluntary programs, just like food stamps is a voluntary program, and we don't require grocers to accept food stamps. It's up to the grocery store, just as source of fair housing, housing choice vouchers should be ultimately a property owner's determination whether or not to accept this. And I am going to share a link with everybody. There is a great infographic that was created by the National Apartment Association, just to make it clear that from an industry perspective, our concern is not so much the source of the income, a resident who may be receiving subsidies, but it is the bureaucratic challenges and strings attached to a Section 8 program. We have to wait for inspections. We have to wait for payment. We have to enter into a federal contract. And many property owners don't want to do this. It does not fit in their business profile. And again, it should be up to the property owner to do this. I'm really pleased that the city had the incentive program. I'm really curious how the incentive program worked. We strongly encourage all of the local jurisdictions to adopt incentive programs. Again, this goes back to the basis of the Section 8 program as a voluntary program. And I think it is true that many local jurisdictions have not proactively courted, if you will, property owners to participate in the program. They've not provided the education, the incentives, and the support for the residents on the Section 8 program, quite frankly. Approximately 10,000 property owners leave the HUD Section 8 program annually. HUD has recognized on the federal level that the program is broken, it's bureaucratic, it is outdated. They have tried with the help of Congress to update the program, and unfortunately that has been unsuccessful. But I would strongly encourage the city, obviously because it's not legal, but certainly because you don't want to mandate a program that is broken. I would strongly encourage the city of Tempe to continue with incentive programs. But again, so some of my questions is the city of Tempe aware of the Glendale position and their letter stating that they couldn't move forward because it was a violation of state statutes? I'm curious, within the city of Tempe incentive programs, what were the results of those programs? How many new property owners have started participating in the program? Are these incentive programs going to continue? How many current active vouchers is the city of Tempe paying on? And should something like this go forward, and I think there was another question in the chat, how is the city going to handle the uptick in participation if in fact that does happen? And I think those were my 4 questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Courtney, and thank you for your attendance today. I'm sorry I didn't catch all of your questions. Number
I know, I should have stopped and gone through them individually. So the first one, is the city of Tempe aware of the Glendale memo that staff sent to their mayor and council in July, stating that because Glendale did not meet the population threshold, they therefore were not able to move forward with a source of income anti-discrimination ordinance?
You know, now that you mention it, I think I may have been aware. I did not have that awareness when I was talking about this with my counterparts. As you were talking about it is when it occurred to me. So thank you. And then what were your other questions?
The results of your incentive program, how many new property managers, owners did you bring into the program, and is that incentive program going to continue?
At the city of Tempe, we are not paying direct incentives to landlords. So I'm thinking you are referring to like the $2,000 payment for housing assistance contract that the city of Phoenix is paying, and then a number of municipalities.
City of Phoenix, it no longer has an incentive program. That might have been my confusion, but you are paying security deposits, fees, and I'm assuming damage above and beyond the security deposit.
So those are conversations that are ongoing with our new landlord engagement, Christopher Grossback, who you met a little bit earlier. And so we are currently, that swath of programming is in process of being dreamed up.
Hi, Courtney.
Okay.
It looked like, sorry, I'm going to interrupt 1 second. It looked like Clarence wanted to reply to one of the earlier questions. Sorry, if we could just let him do that before we go too much further.
Thank you.
Thank you, Shauna. Thank you, Irma. Yes, we are aware of the Glendale issue. We also received the Arizona Multi-Housing Association's letter to the city of Tempe regarding this issue. There is a little bit of confusion with the ordinance that's online because the city of Tempe has had a fair housing ordinance since 1987. It's been amended in 95 and amended again in 2014. So 2016 is the date that I think the Arizona Multi-Housing Association has been sort of working off of, which is incorrect.
Right, and we did recognize that error, but
Yeah,
it
so
still
we-
hadn't met the population threshold for
But-
any of those.
And again, however, our ordinance has been in effect since 1987. So,
Right.
and we're also aware of the AG's opinion that says that cities and towns are able to amend the ordinances from time to time. Obviously, that's going to be one of the things that happens with an ordinance. From time to time, the law changes and
Right.
it requires amendment. So we look at this mostly as an amendment to our.
Well, but the AG also indicated in her letter that there is a population threshold.
For new enactments of ordinances, yes, we agree. And I don't want to get into
Okay.
necessarily
Okay.
legal arguments here. This is not the place. You know, if we have to, we can do that down the road. But we did receive your correspondence. We are looking at it. We are reviewing it. If what you're saying is correct or we need to make changes, we will take a look at those and make those changes as they're necessary and required. So, I mean, that's what we always do. We put it out there.
Yeah.
We ask for public comment, which we got from you, and we appreciate that very much. And that's what we're doing here today as well. And we'll take those comments and look at it, review the ordinance, and if additional changes need to be made, we'll make those changes. So thank you, Ms. Levinas.
Thank you.
Were those all your?
Well, no, there was kind of a follow-up. So Tempe didn't do an incentive program. They're going straight to a mandatory program. I'm curious why an incentive program similar to even Tucson, Phoenix, Chandler, other jurisdictions have tried.
Okay, and I will let Ms. Hollenby Kane answer that since she's the housing manager director. So that's I'll let her handle that, or maybe somebody from her team.
Thank you for that question. So I don't really know the history of why the city of Tempe, I should probably preface this. I've been with the city of Tempe for a year and a couple of months. And so I am not really in the know of what decisions were made that led Tempe to being one of the housing authorities in the Valley that did not offer landlord bonus incentives for signing contracts. When I was at the city of Scottsdale, we did create a program like that. Christopher Grossbeck, whom you met earlier, was the administrator of that particular program. And for the needs of the city of Scottsdale at that time, based on what our experiences were there, we felt that was the direction to go. I don't know what drove the decisions for Tempe to opt out, but they did. And so, you know, fast forward to me being here for a period of time, our leasing, if you would, was lower than we would like. Lower, that's what's comfortable, because we come from the perspective of, you know, while we're spending less money and building a savings account, that's not helping the people who need assistance, right? And so in order to get out as much, as many people leased up as possible to maximize the assistance that we're providing to our voucher holders, based on our assessment of our city at this particular juncture, paying the security deposits and removing that barrier seemed to make the most sense for us now. Now, what we do going forward, whether it is to create an incentive program, now that the city council has supported us with the resources to be able to do something like that, or we decide to do something different, maybe it would be damage claim or damage mitigation, coming up alongside our voucher holders and guaranteeing that should anything happen to your unit, that we will pitch in and helping to rectify the issues. Is still to be determined. And those are the very questions that Christopher Grossback is mulling over with our team and facilitating us through. So I hope that answers your question. So it's not that the answer is no, it's that it's not been, and we're reviewing our options at this time. Now, what's to happen when all of a sudden we have an uptick like we've had based on the things we have been able to do over the last several months? As you know, or maybe you don't know, we are contracted with HUD for a certain amount of money and a certain amount of vouchers. And it's this beautiful cycle of having optimized as many people as we can lease up in the community and spending all of our money. And that is what we're focused on in moving forward and deciding whether or not we need to bring incentives such as bonus payments per HAP contract on the table. So I hope that helps.
Thank you.
And then
I'd like
we
to-
have, oh, go ahead, Christopher. And then if it's just quick, because we're getting towards the end of our meeting. I know I have two more people that wanted to say something.
Just two quick comments. One, our landlord engagement efforts are intended to be separate from the source of income. And so we intend to engage with landlords in an intentional and purposeful way, regardless if source of income protection is passed or not by Tempe City Council. And so the Housing Authority is committed to providing a quality experience to our landlord partners, separate of source of income. Landlord engagement isn't included with source of income. I wanted to clarify that for anybody that's attending today. And second, this goes out to any of our property owners in the city. If you have ideas and want to share them, and Courtney, sounds like we should maybe get together and chat about how to position the possibility of incentives best to our landlord partners in Tempe, and understanding what best works for them in the city and in this market. And so love to.
And we've really seen that's what drives the participation more so than forcing a program.
And we're interested in long-term affordability and tenancy, and so how to balance those things. And so I think we should chat about how to craft that and see what ideas you have to share. And that applies to anybody else as well. Thank you.
I hope we
Sounds
can
great.
both get together, because people out here are forced to go on and live in the streets when there's no housing stuff. So.
Okay, thank you. So we do have, Gail has been patiently waiting with her hand raised. Thank you, Gail. So we'll have her comments or questions, and then I believe I have one more, and then we can have our staff wrap up. Gail?
Okay, thank you very much. I'll introduce myself. I have Section 8 housing currently in Tempe and Mesa. I grew up in a 2-bedroom, 1-bath house, but I do have a degree in finance. I'm a veteran. I've been a realtor for over 22 years. Volunteered with the Area Agency on Aging for about 2.5 years, explaining Medicare to 80-plus-year-olds. So I appreciate helping people that need help. I do have a Section 8 housing with Tempe, and I probably won't do it again. I had to modify my lease. I use a standard lease from the multiple listing service. I'm very well familiar with it. The one I had to do at Tempe, I had to lie. I had to white out. It's got a stack washer dryer in it. And I said it was too expensive. So I had to white it out of your lease. It's still in mine, but if she sells this $2,000 piece of equipment, I'm out $2,000 because it wasn't acceptable. So am I supposed to move it out? Do whatever. Also, I'm on the board of one of the condo associations. It's within a mile of Mill Avenue and University. We're having homeless problems. You put a homeless person in there, the windows are broken. I can't check all the locks, but 3 out of the 4 locks are broken on the door. It takes us 3 months to get them out. Everybody homeless is welcome in there at night. The problem is the landlord has to deal with the police. We have to pick up all the drug paraphernalia that's left outside the unit because it's rented to a recovering drug user. The landlords have to deal with all that stuff, and the police get tired of it. I have somebody that's bigger than I am, and I don't feel comfortable going over and talking with this person. I feel threatened. I don't want to deal with drug paraphernalia, homelessness, what happens is it's pushed onto the landlord, not all the time. I've got a wonderful tenant in Mesa, and I'm going to help him and his 4 children find housing, you know, to get off of Section 8. So, you know, I appreciate you with the security deposit paying that, but what do I do? Sue the city of Tempe if it doesn't cover it? You're thinking about that. But, you know, it puts me at risk as a landlord. And also I can't go to, how do I get rid of the tenant? It puts me at risk. And now you're saying we have to accept this. We can't discriminate based on source of income. As a realtor, when somebody's selling a property, for example, it's been decades, you look for the highest and best offer. As a landlord, you look for the highest and best. And now you're saying that that is not accurate. So I'm looking for guidance here. And I told you that I did volunteer for 2.5 years, drove 26 miles one way to help people figure out Medicare, which is somewhat complicated. And I do have the background for that and help them pick out programs and everything. That was a volunteer activity, and I really enjoyed helping people. So that's not the issue I have, but just the risk that I am at as a landlord when I'm dealing with this. And that's what I would like to see you address down the road. And the incentives are wonderful, but it's more that my risk that I need to have addressed as a landlord, that I have City of Tempe backing me up. If I have an unruly tenant, and again, I'm just talking about the complex as a whole, things that we as a board deal with. Who do we go to besides, they just say, call the police, call the police, call the police. So those are the 2 issues I'm looking for, is how do we deal with things that don't quite work out well, in behavior and also financially. Those are the 2 things I have that we would like to see addressed, and I guess that goes to Christopher. So I appreciate it. Thank you very much. And I appreciate what you're trying to do, for sure. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Shunk. If you don't mind, I'm going to talk to this a little bit, and then by all means, anyone on my team, please jump in. How's the voucher program is kind of a 3-legged stool. The housing authority has a contract with the landlord, and the housing authority has a contract with your tenant, and then you have a contract with your tenant. In all of that, all roads lead back, in my mind, all roads lead back to the housing specialist. Our contract with your tenant, very similarly to your own lease probably, outlines the behaviors, if you would, the rules of engagement. So if one of your tenants who has one of our vouchers is running afoul of their lease, which is running afoul of their obligations, their family obligations with their contract with us, it should be handled by and through the housing specialist. So if you find that there's illegal things going on at your property, drug use, unauthorized occupants, people staying there, not visiting, but staying, messing up the peaceful enjoyment of the rest of the community, all of those various things are points of termination from the program that a voucher holder, 1, agrees to when they take the voucher, and 2, we are able to address through our program. And so I would highly recommend that when you finding yourselves in these scenarios, that you reach out to the housing specialist that's assigned to your tenant, and you allow us to intervene. Financially, I'm guessing I don't remember, but was it specifically to if they fall behind in rent?
No, it's not it. No, it's more damage to the property and stuff like that.
Okay, I will, I'm going to punt to Christopher.
And safety. I think I heard Ms. Shunk talk about safety, her ability to remain safe.
Thank you. I haven't had the occasion since I have been at the City of Tempe But I have in previous roles at other housing authorities. And if it takes, for example, either the housing specialist sending out an inspector or, you know, a couple of us accompanying you to the property, 100%, we would be willing to do that.
Okay. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
And then Dr. Humes, did you want to wrap us up?
Yeah, so first of all, I just want to thank everyone for being involved here today and for taking the time to center your voices in this conversation. I want to remind everyone that housing exists because we have marginalized populations who historically have not been able to gain or realize the American dream, which generally starts with a roof over his or her head. And because of some systemic issues, it's tied directly to income or lack of income. And so I don't want us to lose sight of the mission behind this, and how important it is to continue to involve those of us who receive this assistance and those who provide this assistance. Is this level of conversation from the landlord and from the tenants and from our nonprofits and from our colleagues across the valley that will help us do a better job in partnering with each other so that we can move our brothers and sisters, our neighbors, to self-sufficiency, and that they too can realize the American dream. We all have a role to play. I hope you've heard that the city of Tempe, where it comes to our programs and we put out there, are willing to be excellent partners with you. We want to answer whatever questions that you have. I really stand by my colleagues, and I know that the city believes in what we say when we talk about DE&I. Keep in mind, we all will make mistakes. We have grace that we will give to and extend to each other, but we will never lose sight of why we are doing what we're doing. And so we need each other. We need your resources. We need your willingness. And I thank you for being here today.
Okay, thank you. And Irma, Ursa, Pand, and Annie, did you have anything else for the group before we end the meeting?
I'll just say thank you as well. Thank you to my colleague, Annie Mazzarella. Thank you, Dr. Humes, Chris Grossbeck. Thank you, Irma. We are having another meeting tonight in person. Please do join us if you have time. So thank you very much. It's been an honor and a privilege to speak with you all about this important ordinance.
Can you tell us what time and location for tonight?
If I'm